The concrete was still wet, glistening under the midday sun where the community garden used to be. I watched from my kitchen window as the bulldozer's claw tore through the last standing sunflower, the one the neighborhood kids had named Grandpa. My phone buzzed with a new message from the HOA board's group chat. Progress is beautiful. I closed the curtains, my hands trembling not from anger, but from a cold, focused clarity. I was going to show them exactly what their kind of progress cost. Elara Vance had lived on Maple Crest Circle for 47 years. She knew which porch step creaked on the Johnson house, the exact week the dogwood trees would bloom, and the secret recipe for the welcome wagon peach cobbler that had greeted every new family since 1980. Her world was a tapestry of quiet routines and deep, unspoken bonds, woven from decades of block parties, shared snow shovels, and watching each other's children grow. The neighborhood wasn't fancy, but it was rooted. The change arrived not with a bang, but with glossy brochures. Sasha Thorne, a real estate dynamo who had bought the old Pembroke house a year prior, was elected HOA president on a platform of revitalization and modern value. She spoke of increased property values, aesthetic cohesion, and removing urban blight. At the first meeting she chaired, she presented renderings. The dilapidated but beloved community garden, where Elara had taught 3 generations of kids how to grow tomatoes, was labeled Underutilized Lot A. In its place was a sleek private dog park for premium members. Elara stood up, her voice calm from years of teaching. That garden is our history. Old Man Griffin started it in the 70s. We compost there, the kids learn there. It's not blight. Sasha offered a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Nostalgia is a warm blanket, Elara, but it doesn't pay rising property taxes. We need to attract a new professional demographic. Think forward. The votes, stacked with newer residents Sasha had canvassed, passed. The garden's fate was sealed. The next morning, watching the bulldozers roll in, Elara felt a hollowness deeper than anger. It was the erasure of a living scrapbook. As she turned from the window, her gaze fell on her bookshelf, on a leather-bound volume titled Maple Crest Circle, Founding Covenants and Historical Agreements. It had been given to her by Mrs. Pembroke, the original owner of Sasha's house, a fierce old woman who loved the neighborhood more than anyone. For safekeeping, she'd said. Elara had never opened it, treating it as a memorial. Now, with hands still dusty from the emotional shock, she pulled it down. The key, she thought, wasn't in fighting Sasha's future. It was in understanding a past everyone else had forgotten. The Covenant book was a time capsule of onion skin paper and elegant, fading script. It contained minutes from the first HOA meetings in 1955, landscaping agreements, and painstakingly detailed rules about fence heights and paint colors. Elara skimmed these, her heart heavy. It felt like reading a eulogy. Then, tucked behind a page about shared waterline maintenance, she found it. A single type sheet, notarized and signed by every original homeowner on the street. The heading read, Perpetual Green Space Agreement, Lot 7A, now designated the community garden. Her eyes flew over the legalistic language. It stated that the plot was deeded in perpetuity as a communal green space, to be maintained by the residents for the betterment, education, and cohesion of the neighborhood. But one clause made her breath catch. This agreement shall be considered null and void only upon a 2/3 majority vote of all property-owning households on Maple Crest Circle, conducted in a specially convened meeting with 30 days written notice detailing the specific alteration. Furthermore, any alteration proposed for commercial or exclusive private use must also receive the written, notarized consent of a direct descendant of the original agreement's drafter, herein recognized as the steward of intent. The drafter was Arthur Pembroke, Mrs. Pembroke's husband. Elara's mind raced. Sasha's vote had only involved the HOA board, not all households, and commercial/private use, a members-only dog park certainly qualified, which meant they needed the consent of a Pembroke descendant. Did Sasha know about this? Had she even looked? Elara thought of her ruthless efficiency, her disdain for sentiment. She'd likely seen an old garden and a simple HOA title. The deeper layers of trust and law would be invisible to her. Alara found Mrs. Pembroke's ancient Rolodex. Her grandson, David, was listed, a lawyer in the city. She hesitated, the phone heavy in her hand. This wasn't about stopping a dog park anymore. It was about a promise made between neighbors half a century ago, a promise Sasha had bulldozed without a second thought. Calling David felt like lighting a fuse on a weapon she didn't fully understand. But as she looked at the photo on her mantle, a picture of the garden full of laughing children, her own late husband grinning in the background, her hesitation crystallized into resolve. She would not be the one who broke the chain. David Pembroke met Alara at a quiet downtown cafe. He was in his 40s, with a tired but kind face. He listened intently as she explained, her voice trembling slightly, showing him the covenant and photos of the garden's final days. Gran loved that street, he said softly, tracing his grandfather's signature. She talked about it like it was a living thing. Sasha Thorne. She bought the house through an estate agent. Never met us. Never asked about anything but the square footage. Will you help? Alara asked. Your consent under this clause could stop the dog park. They'd have to revert it to communal space. David leaned back, conflict clouding his features. Alara, I'm a contract lawyer. This clause, it's powerful, but it's also a nuclear option. If I invoke it, I'm not just stopping a construction project. I'm publicly slapping down the HOA president, exposing negligence, and potentially opening the door to lawsuits between the HOA and the contractor. It could create years of animosity on your street. Isn't that what she's already done? Alara countered, surprising herself with her steel. She didn't create animosity. She assumed it wouldn't matter, that our history was irrelevant. You're asking me to start a war to defend a principle, David said. I'm asking you to honor your grandparents' principle, she replied. They built something meant to last, not for property values, but for people. David was silent for a long time, watching the city bustle outside. Give me the document, he said finally. Let me have my firm review it, verify its standing, and give me a week. I need to think about what stepping into this means. He took the covenant, his gesture one of solemn duty rather than eager agreement. Alara returned to Maple Crest Circle feeling unsettled. She had hoped for a staunch ally, but David was a cautious man. The week stretched before her, a tense limbo. Sasha's contractors worked with relentless speed. The fence for the dog park went up, a stark modern barrier where raspberry bushes once grew. Sasha herself was often seen on site, pointing and directing with an investor's zeal. The special all-household meeting notice arrived in mailboxes 3 days later. Sasha was clever. She was covering her bases. The notice, however, was masterfully misleading. It described the vote as a formality to approve aesthetic improvements to Lot 7A, buried in bullet points about new street lamp styles. There was no mention of the perpetual green space agreement, the original covenant, or the need for David's consent. She was relying on speed, obscurity, and the assumption that no one would do their homework. Alara knew she had to act before the vote. David's silence was a wall. She needed to mobilize the one weapon she had left, the neighborhood itself. But how do you rally people to fight for a garden that's already turned to dirt, against a narrative of progress and higher home values? The idea came to Alara in the dead of night. The covenant was a legal weapon, but the real battle was for memory. Sasha was erasing history. Alara would make it impossible to ignore. She went to her basement, to boxes labeled neighborhood. She pulled out photo albums, VHS tapes of block parties, handwritten recipes from potlucks long past. She spent days digitizing them, her scanner humming late into the night. She created a simple website, The Heart of Maple Crest. It wasn't fancy. It was just a timeline. She started with the 1955 aerial photo of the empty plots. Then Arthur Pembroke breaking ground on the garden. Photos of the first Harvest Festival in 1978. Video of the '98 flood, neighbors sandbagging together. A picture of the oak tree planted when the Jenkins baby was born. The wall of fame with painted handprints of every child who had lived on the street since 1980. She mapped it all, name by name, story by story. Quietly, she began to talk to her neighbors, not at organized meetings, but over fences during evening walks. She showed them the website on her tablet. Remember this? She'd say. Look at your dad there building the picnic tables. The response was a slow, deep current of emotion. People weren't just nostalgic. They were reminded of what they were part of, a continuum, not just an address. The day before the big vote, Alara did two things. First, she printed flyers with a QR code linking to the website and a simple question: what are we voting to erase? She put one in every mailbox. Second, she finally received an email from David Pembroke. It was brief. The covenant is ironclad. My firm has sent a formal letter to the HOA board and the contractor citing the clause and withholding my consent for the current project. It is now a matter of public record. The ball is in their court. Good luck, Alara. She felt a surge of fierce gratitude. David hadn't just given consent. He'd made it legal, official. The hidden rule was now on the table. She didn't know if it was enough, but the weapon was now armed. The stage was set for a vote that was no longer about lampposts. The community hall was packed, a tension in the air thicker than the summer humidity. Sasha Thorne stood at the front, polished and confident, her presentation slick. She showed newest renderings. The dog park now included a community sculpture to placate critics. She spoke of increased desirability, of being a forward-thinking community. Then it was time for discussion. Hands shot up, but the questions weren't about property values. Ms. Thorne asked Mr. Jacobs, who had lived here for 30 years, why wasn't the original green space agreement mentioned in the notice? Sasha's smile tightened. Those old documents are largely symbolic, Mr. Jacobs. Modern HOA bylaws supersede them. Then why, Alara asked, standing up, her voice clear in the quiet room. Did you receive a letter yesterday from Pembroke Legal withholding consent, as required by that symbolic document? A ripple went through the crowd. Sasha's composure cracked for a second. That is a private legal matter being handled appropriately. Handled by hiding it from us? Someone shouted from the back. The meeting dissolved from a procedural vote into a raw town hall. People stood to speak, not about bylaws, but about the garden, about teaching their kids to garden there, about grieving there when a spouse died, about the simple piece of it. They spoke of the timeline on Alara's site, of seeing their own history reflected. Sasha tried to regain control, talking about liability insurance and maintenance costs, but her language of commerce sounded hollow against the language of home. The vote was taken. It wasn't even close. The measure to approve the dog park was resoundingly defeated. A cheer went up, mixed with tears. People hugged. They had won. Alara looked at Sasha, who was gathering her papers, her face a mask of cold fury. For a moment, Alara felt a pang of pity. Sasha saw a victory of sentiment over progress. She didn't understand that progress without roots is just destruction. In the celebratory chatter after the meeting as people made plans to resurrect the garden, Alara felt David Pembroke's hand on her shoulder.